Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are going to take a look at what the meniscus of the knee looks like on an MRI scan. Okay, so to help understand how we interpret imaging on the MRI scan, I've brought some fruit here to show how the MRI actually makes slices through the images. So I think this will be really helpful in order to begin to understand how to go through an MRI scan and understand how the images are produced. So let's start off with a simple object here like this apple, okay? And so it's pretty simple. It's round overall. And the MRI scan will produce images by making cuts through the object, whether it's an apple or whether it's a knee. And to help illustrate the cuts, I've got this laser level device here. So what we could do is, if we think of the image as being produced as cuts go through the MRI, so as you see, as my laser goes across the apple, we can make cuts through it in this orientation. And then we can also make cuts through the apple, if we rotate it, in this orientation. So you see how that line moves up and down through the apple, or we can make cuts through it this way with this orientation. You can see how that laser line moves across it just like that. So in order to demonstrate that, we'll make some cuts through the apple like this. So straight across, just like that. And we'll see how the cross section of the apple changes as we make cuts through it. So if we start off right on the very edge here, we'll go right on the edge, just like that. We can see that if we make a cut through the apple like so, just like that, that's the image that we're left with. And then we can keep going across the apple, okay? So we'll go across again. And then one more other time. And then we'll go ahead and cut right through the middle. Okay. So I'll put the apple back together. So now you can see how we've made cuts. Hopefully we can get a good look at that. You can see how we've made cuts through the apple in this orientation. And then one more right there. So that looks like this with our laser. So we got a cut right there, a cut there, a cut there, and then one more right there. So the MRI scan will take slices through the object just like this. And you can see how the cross section changes as we move through the apple, just like that. And then this last cut right through. And so we're all pretty familiar with what an apple looks like, and so it's pretty easy to understand how the appearance of the apple changes as we make cuts through it. Okay, so for this next demonstration, we're going to get a new apple, and we're going to make cuts through it in a different orientation. On the first apple, we make cuts through it like this, and then on this second apple, we're actually going to make cuts through it like that. So really about 90 degrees to where we cut the first apple. All right. So here's our laser device, and we're going to make cuts through the apple just like that. All right. So we'll start down here on the bottom, and actually let's start at the top. So we'll start at the top. So we're going to make a cut right through like the very edge of the top. And then as we've done that, we can see that's the cross section through that top part of the apple. And then just like before, we're going to move through the apple, just like that. It's about to roll off the table. And then we're going to move a little bit further down. And then to make it a little interesting, we're going to go right down here at the very bottom where it's a little bit bumpy. Okay. So now I'll put this apple back together. I got the stem there too. We can actually use the stem as well. So if we cut through the stem, you can see the only image that we would actually see is right there at the tip of the stem. But as we move through the apple, as our cuts move through the apple from top to bottom, we can, again, as before, see how the cross-section image changes in the apple. So we'll keep moving through, and you can see how that looks. And so that's how the MRI creates imaging. And as we go all the way down through the bottom of the apple, like this cut right through the apple looks like that. And if we made a cut just through the bumps, we might actually just see a bunch of little bumps on the apple if we cut it right on the very edge right there. And so that's how the MRI produces or would produce images through a simple object. So you can see how the different cuts, the orientation is different on the apple on the left. The cuts are more up and down, and then the apple on the right, the cuts move from top to bottom. Okay, so to further demonstrate this, we're going to use an object that has a more complex shape, like the banana, compared to the apple. So for the banana, going back to our laser line, we can make cuts through different orientations. So we can make cuts to the banana up and down like this. So if we hold the banana actually fixed in space, we can see as we make cuts through the banana, we can see how the cross-section would change if the banana is held in this orientation, just like that. If we held the banana in this orientation and made cuts through it, you can see how the image cross-section would change with the banana like this. And then if we make cuts through the banana more like this, you can see how the cross-section here might be a cut through the stem and then a cut through more of the bottom part of the banana, just like that. And so you can see how in those three different orientations you get three different types of images. Okay, so now we'll start cutting the banana. So let's start off pretty easy. So we're going to just hold the banana still in this orientation like this, and we're going to make some cuts through it just like this, just kind of a cross section like that. And we'll see how the banana changes as we move down it. So if we start off at the top here, if we just get a cut through the stem, the only thing we're going to see on the image is actually that small little part of the stem, that small cross section of the stem there, just like that. But as we move our cut through, we'll see how the cross section of the image actually changes and becomes thicker or bigger as we move down the banana. So we'll go a little bit further down. You can see how that cross section changes there. If we move even further down, I'll try to make these cuts as parallel to the banana as possible. So that changes. Try to keep the banana kind of together. And then we're going to just keep working our way down. Okay, so if we reassemble our banana, okay, I'm going to try to balance this. Okay, so there's the cuts through our banana just like that. And so with the MRI scan, looking at it in this orientation, we can see how our image will change as we move down the banana, just like that. And we just keep moving down. And once again, we're all pretty familiar with the shape of a banana, so it's pretty easy to see where we are. And as we move further down, you can see how that works, okay? So I'm going to leave this up here like that so y'all can see it. And then we're going to make a different cut through the banana here. Okay, so instead of making cuts through the banana like we did up on this one, we're going to change the cross-sectional cut from cutting like this. We're going to orient the banana differently, and we're going to make some cross sections actually through it, cutting like this. And this will demonstrate how the cross section changes based off of the orientation of the cut through the object. So back to our laser. So we're going to make our cross sections just like that. So hopefully you can see that red line as we move through. So our first cut will look something like this. Okay, so that's how the cross section of the banana will look like that. And then as we keep marching across the banana, we can see how the appearance starts to change. So we'll keep moving up this way. Okay. And then we'll do one more cut like this. So this is gonna help us understand the meniscus. So if you follow my red line, you can see when we get to about we move from here to about there, you can see how the banana is actually cut in two separate areas. So instead of it looking like one solid object on this cross section, if our cut goes straight across like from here to here, what we'll end up looking at is almost like two separate objects. So if we hold our cross section here, actually on the image, we won't see this. We'll actually see just this part of the banana and this part of the banana as the image moves through. So to demonstrate that, that's how we're looking on the banana. So our cuts are moving through it just like this. Okay, so as we move through, we can see, oh man, my banana's slipping on me. We'll move through just like that. So that's how the cross-sectional image looks. And then as we move through the image, it looks like that. And then as we move through the image again to this cut, from this cross-section to the cross-section here, we can see all of a sudden, instead of it looking like a single object, now it looks like there's two objects. And so that's actually what the meniscus will look like when we show you on the model. And so that's pretty much how the MRI produces image through cross-section, whether it's a piece of fruit or anatomical structure. All right, so now we're going to demonstrate how we make these cross-sectional images on the knee. And so I've got my knee model again, and I'm going to get you guys oriented. So on this knee model, we do have a couple areas that are just part of the model and not anatomically accurate. This part right here, this is just part of the knee model that was used to fasten part of the kneecap. And some of these holes through the model were are just in place to fasten the ligament structures that were part of the knee model, but I've taken all that off. The same thing goes for over here. So just ignore those areas of the model. So this is looking straight at the knee. And when we're looking straight at the knee on an MRI, we call that the coronal imaging. If we look at the knee from the side, we call that the sagittal imaging. And then if we look at the knee from top down and we make cuts through that and we move through the knee joint, we call that the axial imaging. And over here I've got my meniscus model. So the meniscus just sits right on top of the knee just like this. So this is what it looks like put together. So that's the meniscus looking at it straight on the coronal. That's in general what the meniscus looks like on the sagittal. And then if we take our knee apart and look at it from top down, the meniscus will look like that. So this is the front of the knee up here, anterior, and this is the back of the knee, posterior. The lateral side is over here, and the medial side is over here. So we call this the lateral meniscus, and this is the medial meniscus. And normally on a real knee, the meniscus is anchored to the bone in the front and the back at what we call the root attachments. And so there's the root attachments on the medial meniscus, one in the back, one in the front, and then there's the attachments to bone on the lateral meniscus, one in the back, the posterior root, and one in the front, the anterior root. So you can't really see that on here just because I got to take this meniscus on and off, but that's the general basic anatomy of the meniscus. All right, so we're going to now demonstrate with the laser what some of these cuts would look like on the knee itself. And so here we are looking at the front of the knee, and we can make some cuts through the knee like this. So we can make cuts in this orientation across the knee, just like that. You see how that makes a kind of an up and down cut, just like that. We can actually make cuts up and down like this. So you see how that cut goes through the knee like so. And if we orient the knee more like this, like that, we can make cuts through the knee like this. So there's my cut moving from front to back on the knee. And that will create cross-sectional imaging through the knee. So let's review this one more time just so it's clear. So we mainly produce 3 separate types of imaging on a knee MRI. So if we make cuts through the knee like this, where we slice the knee in the orientation of my red line, that'll produce what we call a sagittal image. If we make cuts moving like this, from top down just like that through the knee, that'll create an axial image. And then if we make cuts through the knee like this, just like that, that will produce the coronal image. So now let's see what these cross sections actually look like going through the meniscus model. So here's what the normal knee looks like. I'm going to take the thigh bone or the femur off, and then I'm going to take the shin bone or the tibia off, and now we just have our meniscus. And so if we zoom in on this, we can start to see, or we'll be able to demonstrate how these different cuts go through the meniscus. Okay, so this is the front part of the meniscus here, this is the back, and we can make our different cuts through it. So using our laser line, we can make cuts through the meniscus like this. We can make cuts through the meniscus like this. And then we can also make cuts through the meniscus top down. And as you might imagine, that might make some thin cuts through the knee, just like that. So cuts from top down. All right, so let's actually see what this looks like when we make cuts through the meniscus. So for this example, I used my scissors to make a cut through the meniscus about like this. So imagine the intact meniscus is over here on the right, and then I've made my cut through this meniscus. So we made a cut through this part of the meniscus just like this. And so this produces the what would produce a coronal image. And so there's where our cut is oriented. And if I then take my meniscus and rotate it around, what we can see is the cross section. And so over here, you can see how this leaves this triangular shaped aspect to the meniscus on this side, and this triangular shaped aspect to the meniscus over on this side. And this is what we would actually see on the MRI as we move from front to back through the meniscus, just like that. So that would be producing a coronal image. Okay, now we're going to go through a different orientation. This is going to produce a sagittal image. And so there's our laser line just like that. And we're going to move from this direction down through the meniscus like this. Just like that. And so on our cut meniscus on the left, you can see how we've made a cut just like that. And if we flip the cross section up here and take a look at it, we can see how the meniscus would look like on the MRI. And it has sort of this, I don't know, it's approaching maybe a bow-shaped tie look to it. And as we continue to move across the meniscus, let's go down to this orientation. As we move across a little bit further into the middle part of the meniscus right here, if I flip that up, again, we can see this similar triangular shaped cross-sectional structure just like this. And that's what we would see on the MRI with a cut through that portion of the meniscus. And so as we start marching through, we can see how the meniscus shape would change. So to help out with that again, I'm going to make a cut through this part of the meniscus just like so. All right, so now we'll put that back together. So we can see, now here's our laser line. We're moving through the meniscus like this. So we've got a cut here and a cut there. And as we move through on our actual MRI cut on the meniscus, we go through our cut number 1, and the meniscus will look like that. And then we'll go through the second cut after that. And then you can see how the meniscus cross-section changes. So it actually goes from looking like this, almost like it's a single like it's a single piece here. And then on this next cut, it'll look like two separate objects actually on the MRI. So it's important to know that by understanding the anatomy of the meniscus, just like we understood the anatomy of our apple here, we can conceptualize the three-dimensional structure of the meniscus in our mind, and as we move through the meniscus, we can understand where we are in the anatomy of the meniscus as we move through all the different images. Okay, everybody, so we're looking now at the actual MRI of a knee. For this particular view, we're looking at the coronal imaging, which is really just looking straight at the front of a knee. We can cycle through the images back and forth. This is moving from front to back. You can see how the anatomy changes. And so we'll start things off on this image right here. So here's the thigh bone, the femur, and the shin bone, the tibia, is down here. So if you think back to how the cross-section of the meniscus looked, we can see right here between the thigh bone and the shin bone is this black triangle-shaped structure on the medial side and a black triangle-shaped structure on the lateral side. And that is the medial and lateral meniscus. So now that we see that, we can cycle through the images and we can follow the menisci and their appearance on the MRI. So we'll start on this image once again, and you can just get a hint of the medial meniscus here on this black structure, and just a hint of the medial meniscus here. And as we start moving through the knee, we can start to see the characteristic appearance of the meniscus start to change as we move through from the front to the back of the knee. And so as we keep going, we can see how that meniscus changes. So there it is again, and there it is again. So we'll do it one more time. So here we are in the front. Here is the meniscus on this medial side, and here's the meniscus on the lateral side. And so I'll actually start on the medial side. And so here's the medial meniscus, and then here it is again. And as I keep moving back, you can see how the shape subtly changes. Here it is again. And then one more time. And then we can follow this on around. And so as the shape changes here, we're getting towards the back of the meniscus. So you can see it right in this area. You can actually see where it attaches right to bone at the meniscus root, right in this location. And as we continue to move further back, you can see again, it's not really that triangle shaped. It's really, we're getting cuts through the main body, or more of a thicker portion of the meniscus, I should say. And then here it is once again. So we'll go back to the front of the knee now, to the lateral meniscus. And so here's part of the lateral meniscus. And as we move towards the back of the knee, here's the shape again. And then here's the triangle shape again. And we're going to keep moving through there. You can see how the shape subtly changes. And then again, as we move towards the back of the knee, you can see how we start to get more into the a wider substance of the meniscus right here, and then there we are all the way in the back of the knee. Okay, so to further help you guys understand how we're making cuts through the knee, I've pulled up these three separate windows here. So this window on the left is the main coronal view looking straight at the knee. This window here on the right is the axial view, where we're going from top down, and then this is the bottom right is the sort of the side view. And if you'll notice, there's a yellow localizer line on these images. So here it is, and it moves depending on which image I'm looking at. So if I'm looking at the coronal image on the left, you can see over here on the right, top right, how this yellow line is moving through the knee. And that's the plane of view that we're looking at on the coronal. And then on this bottom right image here, you can see this yellow line. And that's also demonstrating the cut of the, or the cross section of the knee from the vantage point of looking at it from the side view. So what you can see is, if we go back to the left image, we can see how as I move through the knee on the left image, the coronal image, you can see how the yellow line moves back and forth on the top image on the right and the bottom image on the left. And so that gives you an orientation as to the cross section that we're moving through the knee. Okay, so on this image, or the sequence of imaging, we're looking at the view of the knee looking from the side, and this is the sagittal view. And so we'll start right about here. And so this is the front of the knee, this is the back of the knee, and here's the thigh bone, and here's the shin bone. And right in between the two bones is the meniscus once again. And here, on this sequence right here, you can see this black bow tie shaped structure, and that is the lateral meniscus. And so the meniscus looks that way just because of the location of the cross section through the meniscus. And so as we continue through with each sequential cut, you can see how these the black colored meniscus here changes. And we can actually follow that through the meniscus all the way to the other side of the meniscus. Other side of the knee. So let's go back. And so we're back on the lateral side again. And here's the front and here's the back of the meniscus. So we can follow the very front of the meniscus. And you see the black triangle shaped structure of the anterior part of the meniscus. And we can just follow that on around, and you can actually just get a sense of it right here, again right here, again right here, and then right where it attaches the bone at the anterior meniscus root attachment to the tibia. We'll go back lateral again, And we'll follow the back part of the meniscus now. Here it is. And then we're still moving through it. There's the meniscus once again. Once again, you see it right here. And we'll keep following it along. Here it is once again. And you start to lose it a little bit because the meniscus is sort of turning a little bit in the knee, but you can still get a sense of the same black structure. There's a little bit of it there, and then you lose it on this particular cut, but you can see right where it starts to attach to the tibia. And so we'll move to this. This is the medial side of the knee now. And femur and tibia, and then this black structure right between it is the meniscus again. And so we'll start moving through it. And so in the front of the meniscus here, you see as we move through, the shape of the meniscus starts to change as we take cross sections through different parts of the meniscus. So here's the front of the meniscus again on the medial side. Once again, you can still clearly see it. And then you can start to see as it heads down to attach to the tibia right there. And so there's the meniscus attachment, the medial meniscus attachment to the tibia. And then we'll come back and we'll do it on the posterior part of the meniscus. And so we'll follow it in the back. And so here's the posterior part of the medial meniscus. And here it is once again. And you can see now it's just about attached to bone, and then you just barely make out this little sliver of the meniscus here. And then at this point it's attached to bone along the posterior root of the medial meniscus. And so that's how that looks on the sagittal view. All right, so to once again help you guys get oriented, I've split the screen, and on the left is the coronal view looking straight at the knee, and on the right is the sagittal view looking at the knee from the side. And this yellow line again is the localizer line that shows us where the sagittal image is moving through the knee. So for example, if I start moving through the sagittal image, which is the image on the right that's moving, you can see the yellow line moving across the knee on the left image. And that is where we are moving from the knee, looking at the side. And so you can see as I move through the image on the right, which is a sagittal view from the side, you can see how that yellow line is moving through the knee and giving us cross-sectional views as we move on across. So if we come over to the medial side, which is right here on the left-hand image, we can see how that looks in the sagittal image if we were going to cut the knee right along that line. And so on the left image here, you can see our medial meniscus, and you see how that looks right there, that little black triangle. And then you can see here how it actually looks on the sagittal view if you cut the meniscus in that orientation. So you can see how the shape of the meniscus appears on the sagittal view at this level, moving from medial to lateral. So I know that's a little bit confusing, it just takes a little bit of practice for that. Okay, so on this last sequence of images, we are on the axial view, which is just a cut right through the middle of the knee, middle of the leg, almost like chopping a log in half and looking at it on end. And so this is the front of the knee, and this is the kneecap, the patella, and this is the thigh bone behind it. And so we can move through the knee just like this. And this is a little bit harder to see the meniscus on, but if we come all the way down to this area here, what we're doing is we're looking exactly top down onto the meniscus structures, just like that. And because the meniscus isn't very tall, so to speak, it's hard to get a clean cut right across the meniscus. But that's what it looks like on the axial view. So to help understand this a little bit better, what I'm going to do is split the screen, and then I'm going to pull up the coronal view, where we're looking straight at the knee. Okay, so the coronal view is on the right, the axial view is on the left. And so if I click on the left image, you can see our yellow localizer line right here. And as I move through the image on the left, you can see how the yellow localizer line is moving up through the knee. And so we'll start all the way at the top. And so this is higher up on the knee, right where the thigh bone starts to flare out into the knee joint part of the thigh bone. And we'll move that yellow line down. And so you can see on the left image how the knee actually looks as we start moving down, making cuts across that yellow line. And so you can see right when we get to this yellow line, right about to the joint, right here, you can see this is the best we can do. The yellow line kind of jumps up and down. And so the MRI takes cuts maybe every 2 or 3 millimeters or so. And so we'll go to about right here. And so this is through the joint on the medial side, through this medial meniscus. And so if we look at where that yellow line is oriented there, we can see on the medial meniscus here, that black C-shaped structure is that medial meniscus where we've kind of shimmed off part of it. And if we go up a little bit more to where our localizer line is here, you can see that yellow line cuts right through the lateral meniscus. And if we look at it over here, we can see how we just barely catch part of the lateral meniscus on that axial sequence. Okay, everyone, so on this final set of images, we're looking at an MRI scan, but the image is processed a little bit differently, and so that's why the bones look white on this particular image. On the other images, the bones looked darker color. That's called a T2 image, and the image where the bones appear white and the fat is white, that's called a T1 image. And I'm just going to show you guys this because the contrast between the bone and the meniscus on this is makes the meniscus a little bit easier to see. And so if you're looking through your own MRI scan, you can go to this particular T1 type image and go through the meniscus just like you did all the other ones. And so you can see this is the coronal once again, and as we cycle through the imaging, we can see the black meniscus sitting right here in between the bone. And just like we did on all the other images, we can follow that through really pretty easily on this particular MRI. So hopefully after you've gone through all this this whole video, you understand how the meniscus appears on an MRI scan, how the MRI creates the images through cross-sectional imaging, and hopefully this helps everyone understand what the meniscus looks like on an MRI scan.